to kick us off.
Hey, thanks, Ollie, and thanks for having me on this session today. Hello, everyone. My name is Gaurav Mehra. I currently work with EY. I lead transformation based out of Hong Kong for the region. And a bit about me, I'm an ex-banker turned consultant, and I've worked across different facets of financial services in my career. I think the last decade has been heavily focused on transformation. And I think one of the reasons why I was keen to sort of join this session was because one of the levers of transformation is workforce. And I think that's really reshaping the way we work. So looking forward to the chat today.
Charlie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. I'm a partner at BCG. I focus on consumer and retail, and with another side of my sort of facet is on transformation, similar to Gaurav. I've been out in Hong Kong for the last 4 years. And the other thing, and the reason why I'm here, is that I head our people team for Grace Bay.
Ollie.
Hi, everyone. Also very delighted to be here. So similar to Gaurav, I am with EY. I'm a partner. I'm actually a partner of the UK office on secondment in Singapore. And I'm also quite recently joined with EY. So I actually spent the majority of my career at Accenture. But at EY, I'm leading our strategy and transactions practice for capital markets across the Asia-Pac region. And one of the things that we have looked into is very much various operating models, given the various different changes in terms of transformation. So I'm definitely looking forward to bringing some of those views to today's session.
Finally, Johnson.
Hi, everyone. My name is Johnson Chung. I'm a senior partner at Oliver Wyman. I joined the firm in an interesting time in 2020, in the middle of a COVID lockdown. I'm sure we'll get into that later on in terms of, in terms of talent development in times like this. 30 years of global experience, of which 25 in management consulting. I retired halfway to do private equity. Previously, I was a partner at BCG and Bain. Very happy to be here and look forward to, I'm sure, a very interesting discussion that we'll have.
Excellent. Thank you all. So just in terms of some housekeeping for those who are logged on and watching this live, you're welcome to submit questions throughout. And I will try and weave those into the discussion. If I don't, we should have sort of 5-10 minutes at the end to cover anything off that we possibly can. So feel free to send through anything you like, and I will endeavour to ensure they are answered by our panel. So just in terms of our context, so I think the term has been kind of coined the Great Resignation. It's created a real sense of urgency for employees in Asia. The pandemic has changed employees' expectations around work. So the context of the discussion is really what employers are doing to reduce attrition, boost attraction, deal with the sort of inevitable skills gap during this challenging period. So there's a number of topics which we will hear from our panel on, and some specific actions that they are taking with where they're working at the moment. So we'll kick off. So first topic, I guess, in terms of we run an insight report each year just in terms of the broader market. Nearly 50% of the respondents to that within consulting said they expected to move jobs in the next 12 months, which is a higher percentage than we see normally when we do our annual survey. So I guess question to the panel firstly, what do you think is the primary cause for the movement of talent in the consulting market at present? And I guess what actions are you taking to reduce attrition during this period? And we'll kick off with Charlie.
Great, thank you, Ollie. Well, I guess, the first thing to say is, we're all on the call, we all understand consulting, and attrition is not something unexpected, although 12 months is much faster than we might expect. I think, with my sort of BCG hat on, we're actually not experiencing higher attrition than we might expect. But what we are seeing is actually attrition at different levels than what we might expect. So we're seeing a lot more leaving at the sort of managerial level. And I think that's the level that people are getting pulled to some really interesting different new industries that are emerging. So for instance, we're seeing quite a lot of people going off to Web3 or crypto industries. The other things that you know, other reasons why I think people are leaving are, you know, Hong Kong in particular, where I'm based. There is an exodus of talent, which means that people are, you know, leaving good jobs in other corporates and other industries and freeing up, you know, excellent opportunities for people coming out of consulting. And then I think the third thing is that people have reassessed on the back of COVID. You know, some people want more work-life balance. I mean, there's no shying away from it. Consulting is not an easy career, and we do put in a lot of hours. So we see some people just wanting to take a bit of a break. Particularly what we're doing. So we have, you know, responding to the sort of Web3 and crypto space, we've set up teams that are actually responding and looking for opportunities in that space. And we've had some success there, and that has actually invigorated some of our workforce to get involved in that. And then I think the other thing that we're doing just in response to this is generally looking after people. So finding people initiatives to incentivize people to stay, making sure that people have that balance of hybrid working. You know, are they set up at home to work effectively? Do they have, you know, the care packages they need if they get COVID or someone gets ill? And very little things that go a long way, like leaders just picking up the phone to make sure that people are okay. And I think that's maybe kept a lot more people in, you know, in our business than otherwise might have happened.
Are you seeing similar things, you know, Gaurav, in your business at present?
Yeah, so I think few aspects, right? I think just to sort of augment what Charlie is saying, one of the things I keep hearing a lot is that this you know, the Great Resignation, which is attrition, you know, higher than the usual, is because of a lot of, you know, people getting better monetary offers and so on. Personally, I think, you know, and this is based on some conversations I've been having, is that the money aspect is not the trigger; it's the last straw. And what we are seeing is that, you know, there is a huge disconnect in the construct or the social mindset of the staff now, especially after the whole, you know, 3 years of journey that we've had, you know, in the backdrop of COVID, where the way people think about their priorities, their perceptions, their, you know, their sort of, you know, perspectives about what really matters to them has changed, and that is causing, to some extent, a disconnect with the, you know, with certain organizations they work with, which is where that becomes the initial trigger to start thinking that I need to get another job. Now, we just, to add to that, you know, the fuel to the fire is the fact that there is a, you know, general skill shortage, and that's causing people to throw more money, and that becomes the sort of the last straw for people to sort of make those jumps. So I think it's the industry-wide phenomenon. I think a lot of us are facing more than the usual that we've had in the previous years. However, it's not something that can be just entirely fixed by throwing money at it. So what we are doing as an organization today is we are focusing on a purpose-led approach, right? So we're trying to make sure that all our, you know, staff are able to connect their purpose to what the organization does, and that also means, you know, providing them platforms where they can execute and experience some of their personal priorities, right? For example, let's say something around environmental aspects or something around some social causes, and that gives people a more deeper connect than just purely work. And that becomes a, you know, good way to bond and sort of, you know, I would say curtail this to some extent, because people start having a broader relationship with the organization. And at the same time, you know, obviously just focusing on the growth mindset, looking at individual careers and so on and so forth. But it's a much more deeper issue, and it's not about money. And I just want to repeat myself there, because that's where we all think about Great Resignation is about, you know, companies throwing more money to get it, but that is the last straw, not the trigger.
Yeah. Maybe I could just jump in there, Gaurav, because we've seen a similar thing recently with you know, at the managerial level, people taking jobs that offer maybe a different experience, but maybe offer a little bit more money, but actually they're not incentivized by that at all. They say that that's a nice short-term perk, but actually I'm giving up the longer-term financial benefits of staying in consulting to go and do something that's just a bit different and have a bit of a different experience. So they're saying, we're not worried about the money, is what we're seeing as well.
And do you feel the actions you're taking now, that you've mentioned there, will have a sort of a longer term effect on the attrition, a slightly higher attrition that you're seeing at the moment, or is there a limit, you know, within consulting, what you actually can do to fundamentally change the job and the experience of people working in the industry?
So maybe just a quick response there is that I think attrition is part of business. We all deal with it in different ways. I think you don't want to be at the receiving end as an organization. You want to be maybe at a level where it's manageable, because attrition also has its own benefits as well, right? It helps in making sure that you're turning the talent in the right way. But to that point, I think the things that we are doing is we're trying to make sure that our employees see the organization beyond just a workplace. So it's expanding that by providing them multiple opportunities to execute their personal purpose, be able to do things that matter. And you have to understand that what has changed in the last 3 years is that a lot of us have started reprioritizing things like family, our social responsibilities, our friends, all of those things, which earlier used to be in the reverse order, right? So if as an organization, I can enable that for people along with them having a chance to work, that allows them that better that bond. So we want them to not feel like we're leaving. So that latter won't happen, right? So it's more about that aspect.
Makes sense perfectly. And I guess the other challenge with what we've seen in the last 2 years is around kind of employees reevaluating what they can expect from company culture, employee value proposition. And I guess you've talked about it there, sort of potentially a feeling that they want to have more of a purpose. They want to do something that's more sort of important to their new priorities. Is there anything sort of tangible, any real actions, any specific things that you've done that have sort of, I guess, changed, to kind of fall in line with these new priorities that the people you're hiring now have? Coming to you, Johnson.
The short answer is we don't have the foolproof solutions, to be honest. Like what Gaurav is saying, right? Attrition is part of the business. There's good and bad attrition. So the key thing we need to manage is bad attrition. And it comes in waves. I cover Asia and I travel between Greater China and Southeast Asia regularly. I've done 66 nights of quarantine last year and already done 28 this year. So if example, Oliver Wyman in Greater China last year, we had huge attrition in 2020 and 2021. Two reasons. During the lockdown, where part of the fun of being in consulting, despite the hard work, was the ability to travel. And COVID obviously took that big part of the equation away, but kept the rest, right? It was still tough and time consuming, stressful and all that. So that kind of took a big chunk of the reason why people joined consulting away, and as a result gave people ideas of leaving. And then on top of that, before the crackdown, obviously, sorry, I'm having some problem with my PC. The tech company was going through a boom time, and they were paying top dollars, not necessarily in basic pay, but with a lot of promise of stock options, right? And they hear some of their classmates, making, a gazillion amount of money when that company went IPO. Then obviously, young folks, especially those in China where the parents already got a few properties, so they felt like they could take the risk on top of the millennials value, right? Where they think shorter term, they want more focus on themselves and stuff like that. But guess what? The whole trend in Greater China has stabilized. We don't see that in this year. Take for example, when we saw a lot of that in 2020 and 2021. Whereas in Southeast Asia, on the other hand, we started to see that attrition wave second half of last year, and this year was okay. Was second half of last year because of the digital banking craze, right? So a lot of banks was going through the digital transformation, the 4th digital banking license in Singapore and then now Malaysia. They needed talent, and where do they go after talent? Consulting firm, at least one of the sources they go to. So my point is they comes in wave, right? So as a firm, what we need to manage is the bad attrition. Some of that is triggered by COVID, the work-life balance, the more focus on well-being, and I'm sure all the firms tries to do, right? So we introduce example OW Day, where one Friday in every month is declared so-called the OW day, where it's not a non-working day, right? So even if you're on a project, unless on an exceptional basis, that day is declared a rest day. And then, while we always have the mentorship program, we try to step up and enhance that to make it more real, to have more interaction. The partners really have to chip in more hours to provide counseling, experience sharing, not necessarily on career, but to have that more personal connection. And what Gaurav said is also true. We try to remind people of why you join consulting in the first place, the impact that you want to have on clients. And because sometimes over time you forget to tell that story. So we need to kind of retell the story and remind people the good things about consulting. But most importantly is capturing or capitalizing on every opportunity to bring people together, which has been tough for the last 2.5 years. Like this week, we finally have our offsite in Southeast Asia, in Phuket, and the firm throw in actually extra 2 days, right? So that people have more fun rather than a packed 3-day offsite. There's a lot of business, but this is going to be a 5-day offsite with some business but a lot of fun, so that people can reconnect after 2.5 years. So those are the things that we try to do. But do they really solve the problem? To be honest, not sure. But it seems to be stabilizing the situation, at least for now.
And Ollie, from your perspective, as someone who's sort of more recent into the region, do you see differences from what you've experienced with people joining consulting or within consulting in the UK and EMEA versus where you are now, in terms of their priorities, why they're staying, why they're going, what the business is doing in Asia versus maybe what they're doing back in the UK?
I see that, I mean, for sure, yes, there are definitely differences, but I think that the challenge is universal and global. In terms of, we talk a lot in this industry in consulting about our clients' value propositions, right? What is the value proposition of anything we do to the client? You mentioned employee proposition, and I think that for me, that's the thread that comes together in terms of what everyone has said. For me, the most important thing at the moment is the value proposition for our people, for employees, has changed. And if we fail to recognize that and fail to act on that, regardless of the region you're in, you will not be a winner in this very, very uncertain time. But I think a lot of the panelists here have said it. People want more than the bottom line, right? Particularly if you think about who we're talking to. I mean, Charlie mentioned managers, right? There's definitely a generational aspect here. If I think about my own scenario, you asked around particular examples. I was based in Europe, UK, for a lot of that time. I was planning to move over to Asia Pac because my husband had a great opportunity. So that was my trigger. And actually, when I was approached by EY, I was approached by EY in the UK. Now, what they did is they listened to me. And I think that is the example I have. That's the main example that we need to do more of. It's listening to what our employees need, because, yes, I had all the questions around where do you want to be in 5 years? Quite simply, I want to have impact, right? And for me, impact could look in many different ways. But another thing that I wanted was to be based in Singapore. So that happened for me. And I think the ability to listen to employees and listen to what your people need and act upon that and show that you have empathy, you can put yourself in their situation, regardless of what their situation is fundamentally important. So the away days, all of these particular specific examples are great, as long as you are listening to what your teams need. And one of the things that we do frequently at EY is we run surveys, and we run them at not just the global level, but we run them at the local levels to really have a really true understanding of what people are looking for. And guess what? A lot of my teams are looking to spend more time with me, with all of our leaders. Okay, great, let's do that. So, similar to Johnson, we've actually got an away day that's coming up, a weekend away in Bali that everyone is looking forward to. And it's just the chance to let a little bit loose and just not talk about work and just engage together as a community, because guess what? It's been lacking for 2.5 years. And that is what people, particularly people from, let's say, senior manager downwards, some partners, of course, are craving at this moment. So I think that is universal, and it's also very reflective of what I constantly see in our UK business. And I'm a partner there, so I'm very plugged into sort of EMEA and the UK, and that I think is a similarity.
Interesting, really interesting. And I guess leading on from that as well is, you know, as a result of sort of COVID years, you know, hybrid working is here to stay, and you know, I don't think anyone would argue with that, but it has come in some areas at the detriment of culture and collaboration, you know, and particularly in consulting, where that, you know, is hugely important, and where the apprenticeship model for people joining consultancy, you know, training, upskilling, working on projects together in the same room has always been sort of front and center. You've now got a hybrid workforce. You know, how are you viewing that? How are you changing as a business to be able to incorporate that into how you run successfully the business and deal with clients, you know, more importantly?
I'll give some views on that if I may as well, leading on. So look, for me, that the hybrid model, we get hung up, I think, a little bit sometimes on location. It's great. It's definitely part of the hybrid mix. But for me, when I think about hybrid working, I think about variety. And one of the reasons I went into consulting for me, and I think a lot of the times I see for other consultants, is we get that variety in terms of I can work across many different projects. I can travel, as was said earlier, and I can work with lots of different teams, and I have ultimately the ability to dip in and dip out whenever I want to. And I think it's only become more evident that we need to have that. So for me, it's not just hybrid working models in terms of where am I physically based, at home or in the office, or a mixture of the two, but it's also the ability for us to provide that flexibility and therefore actually be inclusive to what everyone needs and what everyone might be looking for. And I think that has to be part of the hybrid model, right? We have to factor in social needs, mental health, well-being, overall well-being into the hybrid working model. Hybrid shouldn't just mean, ooh, are you working at home or are you working in the office? There's far more to the hybrid working model. For us, it's definitely something that we encourage. Of course, you know, there are some people who like to go into the office, no problem. And there are lots of people who actually like to work from home for a variety of different reasons. And I think it's about listening and understanding and allowing people to actually live out the work option. And again, give them the proposition that they are looking for, of their choice. And I think that's super important. So I do not force at anyone, and by force I don't mean, I also mean a subtle force, right? There's we encourage you all to be in the office. That's, you know, there's obedient ignorance that a lot of people will succumb to by listening to that from a leader. So actually I make it very clear to, and I think a lot of our teams in EY as well, to encourage our workforce to pick the model that works for them. But of course, when it comes to the office, we still do have the kind of measures in place in terms of how many people can be in the office. But of course, I think the underlying message is that we want to honour what people need. That has to be the most important thing.
And just leading on from that, go on, Johnson.
I have to say that I'm positively surprised, right? At the onset, we all were worried, how would the hybrid working model impact both the client as well as the office in terms of culture, relationship. But I'm actually very surprised. It has worked out pretty well, right? Both within the team as well as with the client. I mean, the client has come to accept. I mean, so long as you deliver, the client doesn't, I wouldn't say doesn't care, but they are not bothered by that. In terms of culture, I think the key thing is, what do we do when people connect? right? So therefore, the whole idea of moving from the old model to hybrid one, the concern was therefore people lose the connection and become distant. I think that worry has then triggered some of the initiative that we mentioned earlier, right? So having a lot more activities, both formal business and fun stuff, with the client, amongst each other, and we have charity run now, so as to create that connection, and that sense of connection doesn't need 5 days a week being in the office to achieve that. So therefore, I think it has worked out pretty well, as far as I'm seeing it, Oliver Wyman.
And Charlie, just to lead on, and Charlie, I'll bring you in on this one actually. In terms of, I think, hybrid working, clearly you've sort of managed that and how you then deliver with your clients, etc., within the market. But equally, if you're a new person joining a consultancy, an experienced hire into your business, and you've got a hybrid working model, surely that's more of a challenge to onboard, integrate, upskill that person in the business than what it would have been before, where you were spending, a much larger proportion together. Are you seeing that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a challenge, right? And I think that the thing, maybe just taking a step back, the thing we have to remember is that hybrid doesn't mean that you're 100%, to Ollie's point, you're not 100% at home, at work, or wherever it might be. It's the mix and the variety. So for new joiners, yes, ultimately they should have sat in the office, or they would have sat in the office, 24/7 or for 5 days a week. And obviously now, it's more difficult. We have a lot of trainings online, and we found them to actually be more effective, with the exception of the sort of cultural aspect of getting to know people, which is actually a huge amount of our training. So I think the critical thing, and to go back to Ollie and Johnson's point, is finding the balance, right, between what works best for you, what works best for your client. And I would say nothing sort of is better than face-to-face, but you need a balance. And what we're seeing, particularly in the US in our business, which is probably a little bit ahead of what we are here, is they're changing their model. Whereas previously it was a Monday morning to Thursday night at the client, or similarly, whatever they were doing. Now it's sort of Monday in the office, or at home, Tuesday, Wednesday with a client, Thursday at home with the children, and Friday in the office, whatever it might be, but whatever it works for them. And they find that more effective because they say, well, you can bundle into 48 hours all your meetings you need with your client. And you can also have a bit of team time there. You have a team dinner, so you'll co-locate for that. And then you go home and you work from home and get a lot done in the day. And the same can be said for for trainings. Previously we had trainings face-to-face, wherever it was off-site. Now we're doing a lot of that online for the first week of training, and then you might do a bit of face-to-face or have some direct activities during the day of your trainings to get to know people and build your network.
Thanks, Johnny. Gaurav, I cut you off, but just to sort of add another point in there so you can kind of consider this as well. But we've got a question. It's around consulting's traditionally been focused on sort of revenue generation, delivering for clients, which often leads to hours expectations from the clients. And I guess with the new, maybe hybrid working, new focus on, wellness, mental wellness, etc., for employees, how do you balance that when client demand gets particularly high or is particularly demanding? Does the hybrid working model, the well-being for your guys, does that go out the window all of a sudden, or are you still be able to kind of create that balance within your business?
Well, I think there's no like a straight answer to that, right? Because we are constantly juggling different priorities as a consulting firm, and our business model is such that we are not. It's just not an employee-employee relationship. There's also a client angle, and a lot of times clients drive how we're going to be responding and working with them. But I think with that context, right, just to kind of take a bit of a step back, consulting has always been a hybrid business, hybrid-led business, right? It's not something new to our the way we work. We've always, we actually have 4 workplaces, right? We have a home, we have workplace as in the office, and we have the client office, and then we also have travel. We actually work in all these 4 constructs, and it's been happening. I think the last couple of years, it's become much more embedded. And our clients understand that, because what's happened is the change is not just with consulting. Every industry has changed. Our clients themselves are also moving towards hybrid working. They're also focusing on how do we make the proposition better for our staff. And a lot of our people, when they work with the clients, they are working like one of them. So they are able to sort of, intermesh sort of form that sort of working ways of working with them, and that gets enabled. But you need to also look at this whole problem of hybrid into 2 parts, right? There is an existing staff and there's a new staff, right? And the answer is different for each. I think the existing staff in consulting has found it quite easy to adapt to the hybrid model, because they were already doing it to some extent, and we have always tended to be very outcome focused rather than activity focused, which means that as long as the outcome gets delivered, it doesn't matter where you're doing it from, and as long as the client is okay with that format. So for the existing staff, it's worked very well. I think it's been very successful. Probably across the industry, I would say consulting probably adapted it the fastest, because we didn't have much time. We had to do that in a matter of weeks. The new staff coming in is where we are now formulating different ways to make sure that they are heavily engaged. And I think in the beginning of the question, you pointed out about the apprentice model. A lot of our people learn as they watch, and that is where we are trying to get more innovative. So we're trying to make it much more rigorous on the onboarding. How do we embed them, the whole cultural aspect, and so on and so forth. And obviously, sort of over communicating on that front, because we feel that's the segment who was probably most at risk on hybrid. They're the ones who can very easily disconnect as soon as they connect. So that's an elaborate focus on that part. And I think the other angle to sort of think about is that from this outcome, right, of this whole hybrid piece, right, you have to also look at end of the day, you have to build this whole top-down outcome-based KPI model around how you deliver things. And then, employees are smart enough to be able to adapt the way what they prefer. I'll quickly share one example, right? One of the clients I've been working with, because how even, hybrid gets misinterpreted is because, they sort of announced very recently that they will want people to come in office on, let's say, Mondays and Thursdays. I was hoping that it'll actually help people feel good about, formal hybrid announcement. But it actually had a negative effect. The attrition went up because the response of the staff was, I don't want to be told when to come. For me, hybrid means I have full control of how I want to work. The moment you tell me to come on 2 days, then you're actually not making it hybrid. You're actually telling me this is the routine. So you have to be very careful with this whole piece where I think employees want to be in control. And as long as work gets done and you can enable that, I think that's what hybrid is all about. It's a broader context.
Excellent. There's a lot to unpack there, so I appreciate all the input. Moving on, so we've talked about sort of attrition. We've talked about kind of retention. What people in the industry are now looking for in terms of employee value proposition. I think there's also an unquestioned talent gap already, potentially in the industry. We've certainly noticed, in our proposition as a business is to provide talent from strategy through to implementation, or end to end for our clients. And I guess my observation certainly is that most consultancies are sort of moving left and right, or have been for years, in terms of being able to work from front to back with their clients as well, to a certain extent. And depending on where you sit, you're providing talent, or you're trying to hire talent that maybe sits slightly left of center of what you're immediately known for in the market, which creates a gap, because everyone is trying to hire effectively the same talent. What we've sort of established, particularly in EMEA, is an independent consulting network, so a curated network of ex-strategists, ex-consultants who provide that sort of short-term support, bench strength for our consultancy clients, and that is in its relative infancy in Asia. It's not so prominent as what we've seen, although we are starting to more and more support clients with one person white labeled within their business. But we also recognize there's challenges to doing that. I guess the question really for the panel is, do you see this as a way of potentially bridging some of the talent and skills gap in the market? And secondly, what do you see as the challenges to being able to do this, sustainably moving forward. And I'm happy to come to either one of you to kick that off.
Happy to do a quick response, and then others can chime in as well. So I think that there are three changes that have happened, which is triggering in the direction of what you're saying, right? Now, one is our clients are already demanding highly diverse teams to come and work for them, right? When that happens, and when I say diverse, it's not just about gender, not about just color. It's about people who can come with different thinking when they deliver on those projects, right? And I think that is where we are also now seeing that we need to hire very different sort of skill sets to be able to deliver effectively. Some of those skill sets are non-traditional consulting skill sets, and those people with those skills don't necessarily see consulting maybe potentially as a career. They see it, okay, fine, as I can get and do some projects for them, but they don't necessarily see it as a career where they want to be part of it. But we still need them as part of delivery, right? And I think the other thing you got to realize also is that in this last 2 years, there's been a huge shift in the bargaining power between the employer-employee relationship in consulting, right? So, as employers, as consulting firms used to sort of be very coveted in terms of the way they can define how the employee construct works. Now, today, employees have equal amount, or maybe in some cases more, and they are demanding their own aspects on how they prefer to work. Could be, gig, could be contract, could be so on. So coming back to your question, I think all these things are causing even us to rethink our own resourcing model. Do we continue to do the same full-time employee hiring, and is that the only model, or are there other options to look at, where we can look at gig staff, where we can look at contractor staff, or people who don't want to be employees, but they want to come and work for free projects, and hence firms like what you mentioned, yours, who's going to be doing that in other geographies and potentially in Asia, becomes an important aspect of the way we resource. So absolutely, yes, the way we resource is changing. We are looking at non-traditional ways to look at bringing in the right talent to deliver the outcomes to the client. And for the client, as long as they get that diversity in the team that is delivering, it works and clicks, right? And hence we have to tap into these different avenues.
Yeah, I think in Asia, the short answer to your question, Ollie, is it is possible, but it's going to take time, because Asian clients in general, they prefer, they buy certain brand for certain reasons, right? And I think it would, and how the consulting firm respond to that model, in addition to what Gaurav just mentioned, but more likely is driven by how client would react to that model, right? And I think client will be okay that in this project, I'm using one or two, part-time so-called experts. If it is a topic that is so new that they think is acceptable, that even consulting firm, we don't have all the answers. And the experts that we bring in can actually, be helpful. That would be fine. But otherwise, if it's a normal topic, right, you're talking about, say, strategy or branch transformation, or even digital transformation. If your model is where you have a 20% FTE of from outside, sometimes Asian clients may feel a bit nervous, in my opinion. So it takes a bit of education as well, and obviously the assurance that the delivery will still be tip-top, in order for client to become acceptable to that model over time. But otherwise, it's a challenge, I think, in Asia.
Yeah.
Charlie.
I think I'd totally support that. I mean, I think you have to protect from a sort of personal perspective. You have to protect the brand and the intellectual property, right? And so you have to be careful what roles you bring these people in for. I think Johnson's got a very fair point on the Asian client, but I think from an internal perspective, you need to think very carefully about how you can leverage external sort of consultants effectively. So I think from the expert side, absolutely. I mentioned earlier, we do some projects now in some of these new industries. We don't have a lot of capability there because it's a new industry, right? It's only been going for a year or a couple of years. So we can use in the background experts for that to get some insights, and it's only the equivalent of using GLG or whatever anyone uses for their expert network. I think on the other side is if the client wants you to do something that you don't traditionally do. So we do a lot of transformational work. If you need to actually deliver on some of that stuff and it's very transactional and you can give a very clear scope, but you're going to manage that scope, then that's where you could potentially bring in contractor work. That's the way I would think about it. But I don't think you can bring them in at the moment into your core teams to devise a strategy or to do some very core capability of a digital transformation or a standard transformation. I think it's a leap too far for clients, and it's probably a leap too far. I can't speak on behalf of BCG fully here, but I would think it's a leap too far for many of these consulting firms to do that at the moment.
Ollie, anything to add?
I mean, they've said it all. I would say they've said a lot on that. So no, I will not add.
Okay, great. So moving on, look, it's a challenging market, as we know, and then I think, to overlay that, I think the corporate landscape in Asia is sort of changing. There's greater prioritization around inclusive and sustainable growth, I think more than we've ever seen. I guess on top of the other challenges with talent in the market, how are you navigating this shift in what is an already highly competitive market around inclusiveness, around sustainability within that as well? And I mean, Ollie, I came to you last time, I'll come to you first this time to give you the opportunity.
Sure. So I guess from a inclusive perspective, this is definitely something that's been more and more prevalent. And actually, there was a client that we were working with at the beginning of the year, and it was all around their, the hybrid model. Definition of hybrid is up for debate, as we talked about. But we were speaking to them about how do they actually roll out a hybrid strategy across their global business. And actually, the one thing that they wanted to enforce within this discussion or this rollout was inclusiveness. So actually, if we have an opportunity to rethink, reevaluate, redesign how we operate, right? How we serve one another, how we work with one another, how we collaborate. Let's not just do that from as I said, a location perspective. Let's also use the opportunity to think about inclusiveness, right? So examples, lighting actually, depending on if you suffer from, let's say, epilepsy, certain lights in the office could be quite bad for you. Now, you could have suffered in silence for a long time, but actually making sure that you factor in, everything from that very minutiae example to bigger examples that exist, which also include really loud printing noises or really loud printers. That could actually be a trigger for certain people with certain mental health, right? So really thinking through all aspects of inclusiveness, because it goes deeper than let's make sure we have, a female at the table to say that we've included the female, or whatever the actual mix whatever the mix on inclusiveness is at the time. But actually really making sure that you are redesigning this new operating model to be inclusive to everyone, and also to attract talent, which also demonstrates that you are an inclusive employer and you're doing things more so to tick, more so not just to tick the box. And I think for me, let's also just remind ourselves on that definition of inclusiveness, because I think sometimes as we use it interchangeably with diversity, we're able to track and measure stats around diversity, particularly if we have the numbers, right? So if people opt in and share information in terms of their backgrounds, because sometimes you have to opt in to share that information. But if you have the information in terms of gender, social mobility, ethnicity, etc., then great. But in terms of inclusiveness, how do you measure that? How do you measure how somebody feels, or how somebody has been made to feel, or if somebody feels this level of inclusiveness or exclusiveness, and if it's a fair measure of inclusiveness or exclusiveness? So I think the ability to really think through all of those aspects and also show your workforces that you care and that you're doing that stuff is really important. And I can't say enough how many discussions I have with clients who are focused on this, clients who are holding us to account as well as consultants in terms of making sure that we bring diverse teams to the table, but not only do they want to see diverse teams in pitches or in the delivery, they want to see that we are including people as well, right? We have that ability to actually be an inclusive employer. So I think it goes far beyond, as I say, diversity. Inclusiveness really means making sure people feel, it's a feeling, people feel included and people feel that they can be, you know, the best versions of themselves in your work environment. So making sure that all of those things work together is critical.
That's interesting. I think, you know, my view, and I think you probably get the diversity piece, you know, is not a new topic. And I think, you know, consultancies have been tackling that, you know, for you know, a fair while now. The inclusive piece is really interesting, where you kind of split that out and the understanding there. Do you feel like, you know, the industry is at, you know, the start of that journey in terms of, you know, recognizing those pieces and sort of acting on that, or do you think that as well has been sort of thought about for a little while now?
I think the industry is at the very beginning of that journey, and I think the Asia Pac region is very much so right there at the beginning in terms of, you know, levels of infancy. There's definitely a difference in terms of, you know, what I have seen in Europe and also in America, in the Americas, compared to Asia. I think in Asia we talk a lot around, I have particularly seen a lot of conversations around, including with clients, around gender. And we seem to think if we tackle gender, we have tackled diversity and we have made everyone feel included. But even gender alone, if you cannot think through the kind of the personal experiences for a woman, because a lot of the time we're focused on making sure females are more included. But if we're just saying we want to attack it from a female perspective, but we're not actually thinking through the various different scenarios or experiences that multiple females can have depending on who they are, right? So I am a Black female who has arrived in the Asia Pac region. I'm going to be different to an Asian woman or a Caucasian woman. I'm also a working mother. You know, so my experience is going to be completely different to somebody else's experience. And I think we're not any one group of people are not a homogeneous group of people with the exact same experiences and feelings. And that's the thing that we need to address. And I think that conversation is very immature at the moment in Asia Pac for a number of different reasons. Whereas I think we've had much tougher discussions around this topic in Europe and clearly from what people have seen in the US. But those conversations have not really gone past surface level from my experience in Asia Pac. But do I think that the region is willing? Yes. Do I think that maybe some areas are going to be more, it's going to be more easier to have those conversations than others? Yes. And I think to Johnson's point earlier, we have to recognize the culture and the environment in which we're operating in Asia Pac, and some of those conversations will take longer to have, given the embedded culture, right? We talked about certain types of clients that we have, the local clients. It's going to be easier to have some of those conversations with maybe some of the more international banks who are just more familiar with, as I said, a lot of the kind of historic conversations that have already been ongoing on this topic. So there's definitely a lot of work to do, but I think that the good signs for me is that there's willingness to do the work. And I think our people are really ready to see the shift. But again, I mentioned it earlier, hierarchical obedience. People suffer from that, a lot here in terms of, if it's not spoken about, we will not say a word. Right. So I think but when I actually speak to people, when we speak to people on the ground, they really, really appreciate the fact that they want to be considered a single human being compared to somebody else, and not kind of lumped into a bucket of, okay, you're female, so we factored for you. They want to have their individual experiences listened to and accounted for. But they, do they necessarily put up their hands all the time to say this? No, but do we as leaders and organizations need to put it out a little bit more and show that we are fully behind this topic of hiring and attracting talent and retaining talent, and making sure that we create inclusive environments that have psychological safety? Yes, we need to do more of that for sure.
Great insight. Thanks, Holly. Johnson, you were sort of nodding there, and someone who's been in the market within the APAC region for a number of years. Do you feel that there's now more sort of there's kind of more support for driving inclusivity within your business and within the region? Do you kind of feel that?
I think yes, but we're at a very, very infancy stage, right? So as you mentioned, we started about diversity, and in the last couple of years, I think every firm, ourselves included, started the topic of being inclusive, but limited to, I think, the very basic of LGBTQ so-called level. I don't think we have gone into that level of trying to cater to individual feelings and experience. As to whether or not we'll go there in Asia, I think the firm will do that if they see that is needed for talent attraction or retention. If the business don't see that, I am sorry to say we will not go that far. I mean, based on having been around for a while with different firms, I think that's how we most likely will behave. But yes, we have started the journey, but at a very infancy stage.
And just to add in a question, we've got another question. So on the topic of sustainability rather than diversity and inclusion, in terms of the conflicting priorities around sustainability, reducing the carbon footprint, the value proposition around travel, and other things, is the business considering kind of changing the way they operate, with a sort of sustainability lens on that you've noticed?
That's a great question. Charlie, were you about to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say yes, is the answer to that. Definitely. And we've got a target for net zero by, and I should know this, I think it's 2030. I should know that off the tip of my tongue. But certainly, things on the back of COVID, we have reduced travel. I mean, it was, to paint a picture, and I'm sure we've all been there, it was ridiculous before. I was flying to Germany for 24 hours just to go to a conference to see people, and then flying back, and then flying to the UK the next 2 days or something. And actually, we don't need to do that now. And what we found, coming back to the hybrid working discussion we had earlier, is you don't need to be with a client the whole time. Yes, you have to have face-to-face with them at some point, but you don't need to do it the whole time. So the value proposition around travel does reduce somewhat for juniors, but then the proposition increases for others that actually want to be with family and be at home. And it doesn't mean you can't travel. So there are definitely going to be people that are going to be doing weekly travel. There's probably just going to be less people doing that week in, week out. There's going to be more variety of the travel. But certainly sustainability is a hot topic, very hot topic for us, for our clients. And we've got to practice what we preach as well. If we're trying to drive sustainability agendas at our clients, we've got to do it ourselves. And I think, travel is obviously one of the major things, but even within the office, I can never find a bin now, because you've got to have something in the, the paper bin or the plastic or whatever it is. And we're all focused on that now as well. Printing, our printers don't work, it seems, most of the time, because no one uses them. So I've managed to print out your questions today, but I think that was a miracle. So yes, it is hot topic. It is on our mind, and that may reduce the value proposition for some candidates coming in, for sure.
Yeah, I think just to add a couple of more points, right? I think this is one topic where anybody I talk to in the organization, right, they have a very strong opinion and they are very supportive of it. And that is really helping us take this to our clients and incorporate it ourselves. Because everybody, especially the younger population in the organization, they're very passionate about some of these topics. And they question everything, and I think that really helps because it makes us all think of it by default. About everything we do, right? And just as an example, right, even in the space that I operate in the transformation, you would think, how do you apply, sustainability? But we have incorporated sustainability KPIs as part of all transformation programs that we deliver for our clients. So today, if I'm helping a bank, fix let's say a process on onboarding, I would actually measure, am I reducing the paper used in that process? How is the new process, meeting the sustainability goals? And the best part is that all our consultants and staff really take it up passionately because they feel they're making a difference. So I think this is one topic which is only going to get bigger and is definitely a big positive because it's also helping, to my earlier point, right? It's also helping a lot of people feel that it aligns to their purpose, because many people feel very strongly about the environment, about a long-term existence, about the world problems about it, or maybe even the the global warming aspects, and all of this, they feel that it's their way of adding a bit towards improving it.
Yeah, same here. I think this is a topic that no single organization would not be doing. It's a question of how much. So like all major firms, we have a target, and one thing we try to do is also to solicit ideas from everyone. So that they feel, rather than being told what to do to help with sustainability, they're invited to give ideas and help the firm in terms of shaping how we move towards that target. In terms of travel, I think COVID does change some of the travel habits that is both positive or negative depending on where you sit. But gone are the days pretty much where you travel, I fly to Europe just to do one meeting and then I fly back the next day. Unless for exceptional reasons, but those days will be gone pretty much. But at least for now, I think at least the firm is encouraging us to fly again, to reconnect with clients that we have not connected for the last 2.5 years. But once that is done, I think we will calibrate back to like what Charlie was saying, that the to practice what we preach.
Brilliant. Well, we've come to the end of the hour nearly, so we've got a minute left, and I'll sort of close off. So really appreciate all your inputs. It's been we've kind of unpacked a lot. So we've gone through retention, attrition, skills gaps, sustainability, diversity, inclusion. I mean, that is a whistle-stop tour of the challenges in the talent market if ever I've seen one. So I really appreciate all your inputs and specific examples you've given in terms of your businesses and how you're responding and how you will look to respond moving forward as well. So thank you very much. Thanks to Gaurav, thanks to Charlie, Ollie and Johnson. I really appreciate your time. I hope everyone's found that as interesting as I have. We will send round the sort of summary of the topics that have been discussed to anyone who's joined us. But we really appreciate it. So thank you to the panel, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.